So this last section is really about research ethics and the ethics of being a supervisor. So it rounds off the whole set of modules or sections. There's two sorts of ethics, I think, that we're involved in with being a supervisor. One is the more straightforward ethics, and that is working with our students to ensure that they take into account ethical considerations in their research. Now, in some disciplines, there don't seem to be very many ethical considerations. So, for instance, if they're studying literature, they might well be thematically analysing and critically reading somebody's work, but they're not intervening on their lives, and they're not actually clinically affecting anything. So there probably are no ethics forms to sign, consent forms to sign, or ethical considerations apart from misrepresentation of what the writer says. But obviously, if they're working in a clinical context, or they're social scientists who are asking questions of vulnerable children or adults or populations, or they're doing something that's interventionist, or they're asking questions which might be a bit sensitive or might actually upset them as interviewers, then ethical considerations come in the normal way, and students need to go through at least thinking and questioning themselves about what they want to find out and how to find out about it, and what kind of limitations and what sort of rules need to be followed, and what can be revealed and what can be asked and what can be shared. So those are the usual ethical considerations. One of the big things that students say they want in their supervisor is somebody who is ethical and who also has respect for their work. So it's that second bit, I think, that's a newly considered ethical issue, and that is how we respect them as individual learners and respect what they're producing and some of the strenuous challenges to their behaviour and their thinking, and the way they're researching and the way they interpret things and what they can express and what they can write, that actually being a postgraduate student brings. So that kind of ethics is really an ethics of interaction with your student, where in some of the worst case scenarios, students have reported supervisors who've really not done any supervision at all. Now, none of us are going to be like that, of course, but you might inadvertently be believing that the student is learning independence while actually they feel they need an awful lot more support. Gurr, who's done some research into the journeys that students take and sees it as a rather straight trajectory, talks about this inconsistency between the support that students need to develop and to develop as independent learners, and supervisors believing that they need to let them get on with it to develop as independent learners. And Gurr calls this benign neglect. So accidentally you've neglected them. So always be aware of benign neglect, and it's about checking that the student needs support and what support you can offer. Of course, I think there's also malign neglect, but maybe we don't talk too much about that. And that's where some supervisors have taken students on for their own glory, but not paid any attention to their development, and not put in a kind of managed program where they will work together and they will support their research. Perhaps they do this because they're overburdened with other responsibilities, and maybe there's very many good reasons why this takes place. But a student who is floundering, working on their own in confusion and not making progress due to the lack of engagement from the supervisor, is somebody who's not going to progress. So that, for me, that's an ethical issue. So the ethical issue then is taking the student on and giving them enough of the right quality of attention so that they learn to do the research, develop the knowledge, and write themselves in due course without leaving them to get on with it because you've got too many, or because you didn't really realise it is quite a strenuous job supervising a student through to completion. The other ethical area that comes into this interaction is about working with students' writing, where some students believe that their supervisors steal their ideas when they publish some of it together. And some supervisors, of course, believe the students steal their ideas. I've covered some of this when we've thought about writing for publishing from the PhD. But I think it's important to be explicit, clear, fair and ethical in all our dealings with students when we're co-writing, so that the ownership of the knowledge and the development of the expression is something that's clear from the start, and the apportioning of recognition for the publication is decided and agreed between you, so there's no hard feelings at the end when things are published. So two sets of ethical dimensions then, and one is about respect really for students and their work, and that it must be mutual too. They must have respect for us as well. And the other one is about the ethical procedure, the methodology, the methods, the ways in which the research is conducted and how it's used, how it's expressed. So two sets of ethical issues to take into account throughout the student's journey and afterwards when they submit and publish.